type of rail that we're riding on today is what's known as narrow gauge rail. The gauge refers to the distance from railhead to railhead. Our narrow gauge measures 36 inches, or exactly 3 feet in length from railhead to railhead, whereas a standard gauge is 56.5 inches from railhead to railhead. The reason why we use narrow gauge in the mountains instead of standard gauge is twofold. One, it's cheaper to have narrow gauge. Two, it's logistically impossible to do certain standard gauge tracks up here. For example, that 180-degree turn we did at Horseshoe Curve, we did about 200 feet. A standard gauge would need about a quarter mile to make that exact turn. They also can't take as steep grades as a narrow gauge can. Our narrow gauge engine pulling us today can take grades as steep as 18%. The engine pulling us today, steam engine number 10, built in 1926 by the Shea Locomotive Corporation out of Lima, Ohio. It is the largest Shea they ever built for narrow gauge tracks, weighing it at 84 tons. It only maxes out about 14 miles per hour, but don't let that speed fool you because it is 84 tons of pure torque. There is not a single grade with a load of logs that this train cannot take. From what I understand, in its heyday, this train could haul 21 log cars full of 80 tons of logs each with no problem.
Yeah, it's a powerhouse. How many cars? 21, each with 80 tons of lumber. Yeah.
What happened to the cross ties here? So
our 402 decided to be difficult and lose a coupler right there. Ties are fine though. They're just a little surface damage.
We'll notice off on the right a Forest Service road. This is today known as Mill Canyon Road, but this was actually the last line used by the Madero Sugar Pine Lumber Company. In 1927, they carved out this bed and they laid tracks on it, used it until the company closed in 1931. There are about 400 such miles of tracks, railroad beds like this that the Madero Sugar Pine Lumber Company cut out, but they only ever operated about 40 miles of track at any given time. Basically, they'd lay down the line. Once they clear cut an area, they'd rip it up and they'd relay it someplace else. So if you're an outdoorsman or a backpacker, this gives you 400 miles of graded trails to explore down. They're some of the best bicycle rides out here in the mountains.
Have they been paved over or they didn't gravel like this?
Some of them have been paved like way back in the 30s and 40s, but a lot of it's been undone.
We're coming through a railroad crossing here, at which point our engineer is going to ring the whistle and ring the bell and blow the whistle. Good opportunity to get a video.
This is a 4-mile ride. How many miles was the actual for the logging?
So on average, they had about 40 miles of track that they used at any given time. Sometimes less, like 25, and it'd be a 25 laid one way and then 25 back. This is kind of a misnomer. It's 2 miles out, 2 miles back. Okay. We're gonna be riding the same track on the way back up. Yeah.
You'll see a small green shrub growing on either side of the tracks with a small white flower on it. You may be tempted to pick this flower, but I'm going to warn you against it. It is known as bear clover, but us mountain folk know it as mountain misery. You see, there's a chemical in there that when you pick it, will get all over your skin, and when it mixes with sweat, it'll actually create a mild acid burn. It'll burn pretty good until you can wash it off with water and soap. When it gets in your clothing, it'll actually create a harsh odor. It takes about 5 to 6 deep washes to get out. That's why we call it mountain misery. Native Americans had a different name for the plant. They call it the medicine plant. You see, anytime they get a headache, joint pain, migraine, back pain, you name it, they brew it into a bitter tea, and they drink it and be a cure-all. That's because there's a chemical in it called acetylsalicylic acid that is the leading ingredient in aspirin.
Yeah. Like they're onto something. It's crazy how much they knew. Yeah.
Up ahead on the right, we're going to see a very strange-looking tree. With its reddish-colored bark and small olive leaves, it doesn't quite look at home here in the Sierras. Looks like it'd be more at home in the sub-Saharan Africa or in the Australian outback, but it is in fact native to this region. That is, of course, the manzanita tree. Manzanita is Spanish for little apple, and true to its name, the tree grows a tiny little berry that resembles a tiny little apple. You can't eat the berries. They are very sour, though. Very, very sour. It's like a Warhead candy times 10 without any sugar put into it. It's so sour that most people don't like it. Even the Native Americans didn't eat it unless they absolutely had to. But who do like them are the black bears. The black bears like them so much that when they're hibernating for the winter time, they'll return to their own scat piles for seconds.
I like corn, but not that much.
Especially since bears have a pretty good sense of smell too, so you'd think they'd be.
Yeah, right, yeah.
During its heyday, the Madera Sugar Pine Lumber Company employed no fewer than 800 men, 400 of which were lumberjacks that lived out here in the small shanties in the forest. The other 400 were mill workers at our twin mills at Madera and Sugar Pine. The rest were railroaders. The unskilled labor was paid 10 cents an hour, while more skilled labor was paid 30 cents an hour, while the lumberjacks were paid by the tree they cut down. The bigger the tree, the bigger the paycheck. How they would do it is they'd cut the tree down and then strap the downed log to a big contraption called a donkey engine, basically a pre-World War I era steam engine tank, if you can picture that, with a big wheel on one side and a big winch on the other. They then pull the down log down to the train where they'd load it up onto the log cars, then take it to the rough cut mill at Sugar Pine, about a mile south of us at the bottom of the Lewis Creek Canyon. Once there, they'd cut it up into a shape of 2 foot by 2 foot and 16 foot length, and they'd load it up onto a wagon that took it down to Madera, about 70 miles away. This wagon trip was incredibly arduous. The roads were bad, and the trip was really long. Each wagon took 2 men and a whole team of horses 2.5 days to complete, so it was a very expensive way to ship lumber. What they ended up doing about the turn of the century is creating something called a log flume. If you guys have been on Splash Mountain, you've actually been on a log flume. It is a gravity-fed log slide. This log slide in particular went 56 miles from Sugar Pine to Madera, and it dropped about 4,000 feet in elevation. It shortened the trip from 2.5 days to 8 hours. It also gave a few intrepid lumberjacks a very interesting form of transportation. Imagine you're a lumberjack 100 years ago. You got a wad of cash burning a hole in your pocket, and the nearest saloon is about 60 miles away. Well, you can take a wagon and be there in 2.5 days, or you can take the log flume and be there that afternoon. We do have records of lumberjacks doing that, and we also have records of lumberjacks getting hurt doing that. Also, if you were a lumberjack up here, getting hurt was sometimes part of the job. A lot of men did get hurt. In that situation, the company nurse, the only female out of an all-male 800-man operation, would issue you a prescription bottle of Jack Daniels, make you drink the whole bottle, while the other lumberjacks were busy constructing something called a flume raft, basically 4 or 5 pieces of rough-cut lumber that they'd clamp together. They'd then strap you down to it, and you'd wake up in a hospital about 70 miles away not knowing how you got there. And that was the whole point of getting them drunk first, because they said if they did not do that, they would die of a heart attack from fright. You see, this flume in some places goes underground, and in some places it's about 400 feet in the air. A lot of times there's sharp turns, and you are kind of coming off of the side of that flume. Very heart-pounding experience. Imagine if you're hurt and strapped to that.
Does that flume still exist?
Parts of it do. Yeah, if you go into Bass Lake, there's quite a bit of it. Yeah.
Say how much for a ride?
Yeah, right.
How did they get back up?
They'd have to walk back, or not walk back. They'd have to find their own methods back up, via wagon or something else, horses.
2.5 days later.
2.5 days later, yeah. It was a rough life back then. When I found out that fact, I was like, whoa, that's got to belong on there. That's got to. And we don't know how often that happened. There's only 2 records of that happening. But it's a fun story.
Yeah. 400 feet high.
There was a job called a